Well, hey, Crossings family. I had a very important update I wanted to share with you guys. Our elders here at the church have, and I know many of you have been praying and just wrestling through the best way to encourage one another and care for each other in the faith during this time. You know, as we keep looking at statistics on the coronavirus, even in our own state, I think we all realize more and more that COVID-19 is something that seems like it's going to be with us for quite a while. How many more weeks? How many more months? Could it even be a year or two? We don't really know the answers to any of those questions. But we do know how much that this affects our everyday lives, even our spiritual lives. And that's one of the great concerns of our elders and of our leadership at the church. As we start to think more and more long-term of these precautions that we're going to need to take, we also are getting more and more concerned for how we can care for the spiritual life of our entire flock. You know, one of the things that we know from Scripture is that coming together physically in corporate worship, being in communion with each other, fellowshipping with each other, having that time, that body life together is one of the key, vital, indispensable aspects of the Christian life. And so we as the leadership of this church want to do everything we can to encourage every single one of our members to come at the earliest possible time, to come and take part again in this public aspect of our Christian lives here at the church on Sundays. Of course, we want you to consider, each one of us has to, our own personal health circumstances. But again, our desire is to encourage all of our members to be able to take part. But we want you to feel comfortable. We want you to feel protected. And so we've continued to think through more and more precautions that we can take to make sure everyone is able to come and be a part of this. First of all, we want you to know all the precautions we're currently taking, we're going to continue. So everything from taking your temperature before you even enter the building to make sure no one here has a fever, to having ushers escort you in and assign each family a seat, as well as dismiss you out to make sure that social distancing is maintained for every person throughout your entire time in our facilities. Those and other precautions will continue. But our elders voted recently to now adopt and move forward with phase 2 of our relaunch plan as a church. And phase 2 is going to add 3 key elements to what's already in place. The first of these is much like our county ordinance on masks. We're going to now require that all of our members wear a mask at all times, in or around, coming in or leaving our church building and facilities, except for when you're put in your seat and during the worship service, sitting and standing to praise and worship the Lord. But then once again, as soon as we leave, we put those back on. Now, why are we wanting to do this? One of the cries that we're hearing from so many of you is that desire to have that body life, that time to be able to interact and even get to speak to one another face to face. We want to encourage that as much as we can. You know, if you've been at Crossings long, you'll know one of the great hallmarks of our church is that time right after every single Sunday morning service out in the foyer when we're able to connect with other believers and we're able to catch up with others that maybe we hadn't seen that week or for the last few weeks. That is a key part of our spiritual life, that physical, spiritual connection with one another. So to make sure that as many people feel comfortable and safe and are protected as possible, we want to require masks following the service when we get outside to make sure that everyone maintains that mask so that more and more of our dear members can participate in that kind of body life. One of the things we know is when you have 2 people and both are wearing masks, observing social distancing, and are outside, the chances for transference of this virus are greatly reduced. So taking that into consideration, this is something we hope every one of our members is glad to do, joyful to do, so that we can again call as many of our folks as possible to come and be a part of this with us. Now the second addition that we're going to have as part of phase 2, which will begin August the 9th again, is going to be the addition of a nursery and childcare from birth through kindergarten. We know that this quarantine has been especially difficult on a lot of our young families and a lot of our young marriages. A lot of us have been quarantined with young children and haven't had much recourse to be able to get some help. And that just starts to put pressure, and we are so sensitive to your situation. We love you. We care about you. And we want nothing more than to be able to provide our young couples or young parents the opportunity to be able to put their children in a safe environment and then come freely to worship, to sing, to sit under the Word, and even to have fellowship time afterwards. There's a number of precautions that we've put in place, and I'm not going to get into all of those. You'll be receiving an email that helps you understand how we're going to guard and protect our children during this time. But I do just want to share this. We're going to go with a family units or pods model and split up our children according to their family units. That way it kind of limits the amount of exposure to different people. So you'll be in the same room with maybe 2 to 3 other families, but every single week you'll be in that same classroom with those same children from those same families. This is another way we want to care and protect our children, but also to care and minister to our parents. And young parents, I also want you to hear this. We're going to make sure those classrooms are open for a while after our service, that you also can step outside and be able to have some of that family body life dynamic with other believers here before picking up your children and then heading home. The final and third addition that we're going to add during phase 2 of our relaunch is really what probably signs and seals for us in a better way than anything else what we're talking about here, that community life. It's partaking of the Lord's Supper. That's been one of the hardest parts of this quarantine since early March, is that we have not been able to partake and take in the Lord's Supper together as God's people. So beginning on August 9th, we're going to start back to our monthly rotation of communion with one another. Again, we want to take every precaution we can. We're going to be using pre-sealed, pre-packaged elements of bread and wine. Our elders are going to individually disperse those as they wear a mask and have gloves on, and we're going to ask the entire congregation to have their mask on while these elements are being distributed. But especially for our older members or high-risk members who, even with these precautions, just still aren't to a place they feel comfortable being able to come, we want you to know you also are a dear part of our fellowship. And so if you're able to reach out to us the week ahead of time before communion and request it, myself and the elders, different ones, will be going to different homes, and we will bring you the elements of the Lord's Supper so that you also can be a part of feasting on the body and blood of Christ right after our worship service. Dear flock, we love you so much. These are such hard, difficult, trying times. There's no perfect plan forward. But we as the elders and leaders and shepherds of this church want to do what we can to make sure each person feels safe and protected and is safe and protected, both physically, but also spiritually. That's why we keep encouraging you to come and to partake of Christ with His people, with the Lord's Supper, and in fellowship with one another. Dear friends, I want to end with this great verse, Hebrews chapter 10. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let's not give up meeting together, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as we see the day approaching. Dear flock, we love you. We look forward to seeing you in the next few weeks here at Crossings Community Church.